Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different, but honestly incredibly fascinating. We're taking a completely fresh approach to one of the absolute most famous fragments of modern mythology. We're going to methodically deconstruct what is arguably the ultimate unsolved mystery. But here's the catch. We're doing it using only the stark, chilling, and just unbelievably brief text provided by our source. It is literally a masterclass in how just a handful of specific words can construct an absolute legend. And I am so thrilled to break this down and deconstruct the whole shebang with you today.
So before we even look at the specific text itself, I really want you to take a second and ponder the sheer impossibility of the question we're facing today. Seriously, how does a man just simply vanish? Think about what it actually means for a human being to completely disappear without leaving a single trace behind. In our physical world, a world governed by strict rules, biology, and solid matter, a person can't just cease to exist. It defies logic. Yet that is the exact mind-bending premise our source text insists upon. Right from the jump, it completely challenges our basic understanding of reality.
All right, let's dive into section 1, the ultimate enigma, the name. We're going to start by focusing purely on the legendary moniker that anchors this entire text.
Now, what's really interesting here is the incredible weight and pure mystery packed into literally just two initials and a surname, D.B. Cooper. That's it. Our source text doesn't give us a physical description, there's no date of birth, no tragic backstory to relate to. It just presents this character standing entirely alone in the void. It acts as this incredibly rigid, almost formal placeholder for an actual human being. Think about the starkness of that for a second. By giving us an identity that is completely stripped of any history or context, the text immediately isolates the subject. It makes him simultaneously incredibly specific, yet entirely unknowable. It's like building a massive legend out of pure omission. Let's make sure we define exactly what we're dealing with here, because we are definitely not looking at a standard historical recounting, and this sure isn't a traditional biography. What we're actually looking at is an absolute void, just wrapped up in a name. D.B. Cooper is a figure defined entirely by his subsequent absence. The name only really exists in the text to give us, the audience, something tangible to grab onto, something to attach this ultimate disappearance to. It's basically the one solid anchor we get right before the rope is abruptly cut.
Moving right along to section 2, the action, the man who. Let's see how that initial anchor builds into the second fragment of our text, which sets up a genuinely incredible amount of suspense.
If you think about it grammatically, the man who is essentially a bridge. It perfectly transitions you, the reader, from the concrete identity of the name we were just talking about straight into the realm of action. Or actually, as we'll see in a minute, more of a very specific type of anti-action. It acts as a massive signal flare to the audience that a defining event is about to happen. It purposefully leaves us hanging, waiting for the other shoe to drop, and absolutely demanding a resolution that we fundamentally know is going to be impossible to fully grasp. Leaving us hanging on just these three words places our subject right at the absolute precipice of his defining action. It's exactly like that sharp intake of breath right before a magician performs his final trick. Notice how the source text doesn't just flatly state, D.B. Cooper vanished. No, by specifically adding the man who, the text frames him not just as some average guy who did a thing, but as a mythical, larger-than-life figure who is entirely defined by whatever happens next. It builds this undeniable sense of inevitable destiny around him. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the narrative tension between the known and the unknown. On one side of the equation, you have the firm, grounded reality of a concrete identity. On the other side, you have the lingering, almost agonizing expectation of an open-ended action. It literally forces anyone reading this text to lean forward in their seat, just waiting for the verb that's going to complete the thought and define this man's entire existence within the source material.
Which brings us perfectly to section 3, the void, vanished into thin air. We've now arrived at the final and frankly chilling sequence of our source text, where we explore the concept of complete, total erasure.
Look at that word, vanished. It stands completely alone here, representing this sudden, totally inexplicable rupture in our everyday reality. Notice how the text specifically doesn't say he left or departed or even escaped. Those words, they all imply a destination. They imply that he went somewhere else that we could eventually find. But vanished. Vanish implies a magical, almost supernatural cessation of existence altogether. Within the stark framework we're analyzing today, it is the ultimate magic trick performed on a human scale. A living, breathing person just winking out of physical space. When you read the full phrase, it really emphasizes the sheer impossibility and the atmospheric emptiness of his fate. Thin air isn't a geographical location. It's not a town you can visit. It's not a coordinate you can point to on a map. It is quite literally the total absence of substance. The text is flat out telling us that this subject completely defied the known laws of physics, transitioning directly from a solid human state into the atmosphere itself. This comparison right here perfectly highlights the physical, grounded nature of a human being against the formless, untouchable void. We are directly contrasting flesh, bone, and gravity against total, unadulterated nothingness. It's literally the story of a human being dissolving directly into the elements. The incredible tension here lies entirely between what we logically know to be biologically real and what this text is telling us actually happened.
So when we take a step back and look at the entire picture, breaking the source text down into these 3 sequential steps, it reveals this powerful, almost poetic descent from a named identity straight into absolute nothingness. Step 1 establishes our solid anchor. Step 2 creates that intense mythological anticipation. And step 3, well, it just delivers us completely into the void. It is a perfectly constructed narrative arc, and it's told in just 9 simple words, taking us all the way from the concrete reality of a name into a permanent, enduring mystery.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you just staring into that void for a moment with a final, pretty provocative thought on how an unknown fate can transform a regular man into an eternal myth. By providing us with absolutely nothing but a name, a suspenseful buildup, and an empty sky, our source text perfectly encapsulates exactly why this mystery endures the way it does. Because when the physical body disappears entirely into thin air, all that remains is the story. Thank you so much for joining me for this deconstruction today, and remember to always keep questioning the empty spaces.